Okay, looks like we're live. Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's Kármán Line Café. It's an Orbital Velocity podcast where we have casual conversations about human spaceflight or spaceflight in general. I want to welcome back Melody Rose. You can find her
Hello.
on her handles at Little Nerd TV on Twitch, Twitter, Threads, and YouTube. And of course, I am the Space Writer on Twitter and Threads in particular. And of course, Orbital Velocity. So it's been, I don't know, about 5 weeks since we did our last live stream.
Yes.
What's been going on in the last 5 weeks? I think the last time we
Oh
talked
my
about how
gosh.
Starliner was not stuck.
Yes.
Although to be fair,
I think
I will die on this hill. It's still the crew. Let me rephrase that. The crew, I will still say it's not stuck, but at this point, I think we're just mincing words. So, but
yeah, we'll see.
so what was the last thing you remember hearing about Starliner?
That they were planning on coming home.
Well, someday they're coming home. Someday.
But like soon. It was in June. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
July.
Yeah, I did a nice video about how the crew was not stuck. Gosh, it was the
Yeah.
first week of July. It came out July 8th, I think, is when it came out. And man, a lot of people had a lot of opinions on those comments. I don't know if you
Oh
saw
no.
those or not, and that's fine. They're allowed to
Did
have their
not.
opinions. That's fine. I appreciate all
Mhm.
the feedback for people. Um, it is definitely the Starliner saga is definitely kind of a I don't even know the best way to put it. Kind of a obviously the crew's doing fine. It just Boeing is a want want.
Oh
Um,
no.
uh, yeah.
So what's
So
going on with Boeing?
so just the whole. Well, I think the last time I did an update for you, at least they had of course we know when the Starliner started coming up into dock back in the early June. They had the helium leaks and the thruster problems, and they got
Right.
those at least working before they docked,
Mhm.
and they've been there since then. In the last update I did, in particular on the video, plus the last time we were having a live stream, they were
Mhm.
staying longer to get more data
Right.
on the
Yep.
service
That
module,
is.
so they can find. They were doing testing on the ground at White Sands. Well, they've been doing that throughout the month of July, and it sounds like there is no real consensus um, on how to bring them home, whether they should go home on Starliner or go home on Dragon. We may get the answer later this week.
Yeah, I did hear the rumors about the dragon, so I wasn't
Yeah.
sure about that.
So go back to the beginning here. I'm trying to find my little notes that I had about Starliner. I did
I
a
was gonna say,
I
what exactly is going on with the
Yeah, I did an
Starliner?
updated video a couple of weeks ago. Was it last week? Yeah, about a week ago about
Mhm.
everything. Let me pull up my notes for that video so I can get everything all in a row, my ducks in a row here. So, excuse me, or my Starliners in a row. I don't know.
The stars in a row.
Stars in
That's
a row.
funny.
So Butch and Suni, Butch Williams, Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore are perfectly safe on the space station. No problems there. And we actually have a unique capability that they do have another way down if they need it. But basically, over the last month, um, Boeing and NASA have been doing ground tests on a thruster at White Sands, New Mexico. Try to replicate the conditions that the thrusters had on orbit. It sounds like there was a
Right.
Teflon seal in
Mhm.
a couple of things. A Teflon seal. Make sure I know what I'm actually talking about here. Let me read it here. Um, I'm going to read what I actually wrote here. The root cause, Boeing thinks the root cause of the thruster issues that they had appear to be from excessive thermal heating in the service module's dog houses, those little four pods around the side of the
Right,
vehicle.
yeah.
Um, that may ultimately be causing one or more oxidizer poppets, the valves in them, to deform. I think they're Teflon seals basically.
Mhm.
They can deform and possibly expand and extrude the per pathway, which can interfere with some of the oxidizer flow.
Mhm. Oh,
Um,
wow.
so that might have been what was causing the thrusters to, I guess, the computer to turn them off because they weren't performing as expected, basically. And
Hmm.
that plus the helium leaks, obviously they think they understand those pretty well, and I think Boeing thinks they understand the issues with thrusters. The problem is, and as I pointed out in my video, that's just what they think. They're pretty sure. They just don't have a solid grasp of the root cause, the physics behind why the thrusters are doing what they're doing when they do
Hmm.
start to fail. When that in particular that Teflon seal. And I
Hmm.
think the big concern that they've got is you see you got the I think there are 28 reaction control thrusters on the
Hmm.
pods, but you also have OMAC thrusters, which I think those are orbital maneuvering and attitude control system thrusters. The
Hmm.
OMAC thrusters are what are used to deorbit the vehicle, and they can also do some attitude control.
That's
But
cool.
uh, yeah, but they're all part of the same system. There have been
Right.
no problems this entire trip um, with the OMAC thrusters,
Hmm.
but I think some of the concern, in particular among some NASA engineers, is that since they don't fully understand the cause, they could potentially have issues with the thruster, with the OMAC thrusters, especially during a deorbit burn. And there's a and I want to emphasize very remote possibility, a very small possibility that there could be some sort of, because they don't understand the issues fully, maybe a
Hmm.
cascading sequence of events that causes the OMAC thrusters in particular, to stop working and overheating, and then they kind of get stuck in orbit. And if they're not at the space station and their thrusters get stop working, they're kind of just stuck. So the space station is the safest place for them right now. Now,
Hmm.
if they
That's
decide
good.
to, if NASA managers and Boeing managers agree and decide to go back in Starliner, I don't know what the percentage is. I'm making up a percentage here, but let's say there's a 99% chance everything's going to go fine.
Hmm.
We're talking, from my understanding of things, that's how small we're talking, but
Right.
or how small of an issue that might be. But the problem is that 1% is like, should we take the risk if we've got a perfectly functional, if we've got other options to bring them home?
Hmm.
So that's the debate going on within NASA right now. Now, if they decide to bring them home, that is where they get an interesting chain of events here. So I
Hmm.
think
I was
from
gonna
what,
say,
go ahead.
can they send supplies to the space station to help fix it, or is that out of the
There's nothing they can
question?
do with the spacecraft. They can send
Okay.
supplies for food and all that. All they could be up there as long.
Right.
They could be up there for 5 years if they wanted to, with resupplies.
Hmm.
Want to emphasize
But to
nobody's
fix
talking about
the
sending keeping them up
actual.
there that long. But the spacecraft
Yeah.
itself, yeah, you can't fix it. There's no way to fix that in space,
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
because you'd have to get into like the actual, pull things apart and get to the seals and replace seals, and then you can.
Hmm.
It's not something you can do with spacewalks. It's not. I think somebody in the NASA press conference said it's not EVA-able, to make up a new verb. So,
Got you. I
but
wasn't sure.
no, that's fine. No, so the spacecraft as it is in orbit is just the way it is. You want to fix
Hmm.
future spacecraft, obviously, so they don't have this problem. And that is the benefit of
Yeah.
having a test flight. It's not a good look for Boeing, unfortunately. I
Well,
mean,
I'm glad it is a test flight, not
yeah,
an actual flight.
yeah,
That's the only thing I keep like
yeah.
coming back to.
So, based on what I'm reading with a few other space reporters out there, it sounds like NASA will probably make a decision later this coming week,
Hmm.
possibly, about what the course of action will be from here, whether they send the crew home in Starliner or take this other option I'll describe in a second. And um, I lost my train of thought. So,
Um,
what?
Go ahead.
Oh, no,
Sorry.
you're
I was
fine.
just gonna help you.
No, you're fine. So, oh, yeah, there we go. Starliner, notionally, with or without a crew, is probably coming home possibly September 6th. We're not, obviously, NASA will set a firm date once they
Mhm.
make that decision. But it sounds like that might be the date they choose. But Crew 9, actually today, or I think either today or tomorrow, was originally supposed to be the launch for the SpaceX Crew 9 mission to the space station.
Right, I saw that.
They've pushed that to September 24th,
Okay.
um, to give managers more time, because with Crew 8 Dragon docked to space station and Starliner docked to space station, you don't have any more docking ports for commercial crew vehicles.
Right.
So
So they have to wait.
Somebody has to leave at some point. Some
Yeah.
spacecraft has to leave. So
Right.
if they decide to come home with crew, they'll probably leave in early September, and everything will go nominally. Everything will proceed.
Anomaly.
Uh, don't say anomaly.
Right.
Some things will. Everything will proceed normally, to use that word.
We'll
Normally,
go normally.
normal.
I'm using
Um,
that now.
um,
It's like a
hopefully
meme.
everything goes well if they decide to do that. But if NASA managers decide to um, not send the crew home on Starliner, they'll undock Starliner uncrewed. But you have to make sure Butch and Suni have a way home in the very in that, let's say it's September 6th, the September 6th to September 24th when Crew 9 launches.
Mhm.
Um, you'll have, what is that, that's almost 3 weeks. Oof. 3 weeks without their own spacecraft. And so based on safety rules, they have to have a seat home in the event of an absolute catastrophic emergency. So
That's
their
right.
way home will be in Crew 8, under the 4 seats where the other astronauts sit, on
Mhm.
a foam liner, in their flight suits, not their pressure suits, the flight suits.
Is that like plan B or
That
is
is
that
like
like the plan
plan, like,
A?
oh crap.
Oh
Um,
my
yeah,
gosh.
that is
Well, I
the
hope it doesn't
yeah.
come to that
Well,
because
that is
that's
that is the if in the event that there's a significant emergency, a depressure, the space station is no longer safe emergency. But that's what we're talking about here.
yeah. Oh
So
my
the
gosh.
actual plan B is, so they have that as an actual contingency right there.
Right.
But once Crew 9 launches, it would only launch, instead of 4 astronauts, it would be launching with just 2 astronauts. We don't know what two,
Mhm.
if that's what they decide to do. We don't know for sure, to be fair, for anybody listening, as of August 18th. We don't know what NASA's decision is on that one. But if they decide, it'll be 2 crew members on Crew 9 launching from Florida with
Mhm.
ballast on the other 2 seats and spacesuits or pressure suits for Butch and Suni. They'll launch up, dock where Starliner was docked. It'll be undocked at that point. And then
Mhm.
Butch and Suni can now take the place of those 2 empty seats in Crew 9. Crew 8
Mhm.
will go home like normal, and then Butch and Suni will stay with the Crew 9, basically becoming part of Crew 9, and come home in February of 2025.
That sounds a little better.
So Plan A is come home on Starliner on early September. Um, Plan B will be coming home on
Dragon 8 or
Crew 9 in
okay.
February.
See.
Plan oh no, whatever you want to call it, will be coming home on Crew 8 in an event actual emergency. So
Oh my
so
gosh, I really hope that
yeah,
doesn't
that
happen. Oh,
the
plan oh
odds of that
no.
happening are so remote. It's unbelievably remote. I mean, that's a problem. Put it this way: if they're coming home in Crew 9, the bigger story is going to be this. Crew 8. Excuse me, if they're coming home on Crew 8, the story won't be the fact that Butch and Sony are coming home on Crew 8. The story will be that space station is uninhabitable. So that's
Oh
the type of
man.
scenario you would be talking about that would require that happening. But Crew 9 is just, they just, instead of staying up there for 8 days versus 2 months, I want to emphasize there it was supposed to be a minimum of 8 days, not only 8 days. There's a lot of people that talk about that in the news, or 8 or 10 days. That was always the minimum.
Right.
2 months
Yeah.
is not that big of a deal. I think they were
Mhm.
kind of planning on that as a possibility, as a
Mhm.
real possibility, regardless of what happened.
Yeah.
But an extra 6 months on top of that is not unprecedented. It sucks, probably more for the families of the crew than the actual crew themselves, because then they have to go through birthdays, Christmas, all that stuff, away from home when they weren't expecting that. So that'll be tough for a lot of people.
That's true.
That's a mindset change more than anything else.
Mhm.
But I do want to point out that the it was gosh, what year was that? It was the end of 2022. There was a micrometeorite that struck the Soyuz spacecraft on the space station and caused
Mhm.
the external coolant loop to leak all of its fluid. So it couldn't keep the interior as cool as it should. And so, if the crew of that Soyuz vehicle, which were 2 Russians and American astronaut Frank Rubio, and NASA was concerned, and Russia was concerned, that if they brought the crew home a couple months after that leak had happened when it was supposed to, it wouldn't be able to
Mhm.
keep especially in all their pressure suits. The crew would be coming home not in like a normal, room temperature environment through, in the capsule, but possibly with all the reentry heating getting up to like 120 degrees inside the capsule or more.
Oh my
That was a
gosh.
real concern, and so NASA had a
Yeah.
contingency where Frank would come back in a Dragon, probably similar to what they're talking about with Butch and Suni,
Right.
but Russia had decided to launch a replacement Soyuz. So that the replacement Soyuz uncrewed, they launched it uncrewed because Soyuz can do
Mhm.
that. Um,
Oh wow.
and they docked, and then they just replaced their seat liners from the broken Soyuz, for lack of a better phrase, into the perfectly good Soyuz, and then they stayed up in space an additional 6 months, lasting for their whole mission, lasting a whole year instead of 6 months.
Oh
So,
wow.
so
So it's
it
been done
has it
before.
has happened before.
Yeah.
It's not going to
Was
be.
that a crew flight test? Was
No,
that a
that
flight
was a
test?
normal Soyuz. The Soyuz
Just
has been around
normal.
since 1967. So it's just a little piece of space debris or a micrometeorite hit the wrong place on the Soyuz and caused all its coolant fluid to leak out.
That's insane.
I
Oh
mean,
my
yeah,
gosh.
there've been a lot
Almost
of.
like what happens with their when that cord broke and the space station when they were doing that spacewalk. Didn't her like spacesuit, her cord break or something? And like the coolant went everywhere. Do you remember that?
Yes, yes. So the over, yeah, that was
Am I
actually before.
saying it
Yeah,
right?
you're saying it was actually not on the spacewalk itself. I mean, technically, the spacewalk had
Yeah, it was
started,
like before the
but
spacewalk.
before they
Yeah,
actually exited the
started.
airlock, and it
Mm,
was another
mm.
poppet seal actually that probably malfunctioned, but the water
Yes.
popped out. It was kind of a different situation, but yes, it
Yeah,
was leaking kind of like that, and it was a
got
coolant
you.
system, I believe. But
That's insane.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Space is dangerous. People forget how dangerous space is.
Mm.
It's not airline level stuff. I know, to use a Boeing analogy, it's you're not going to get that type of a safety.
No,
So even
that's why
even
they spend
even
years.
Boeing's aircraft on the ground, here on Earth, are technically safer than even the best spacecraft, human
Oh,
spacecraft.
really? Hmm.
They really honestly are. From a I'm probably talking out of my rear end here, so anybody can tell me if I'm totally wrong here.
It's okay.
But if you talk, based on statistics are a funny thing, but if you look at it per flight and all that stuff of how many
Mhm,
people die per flight, it's really low,
mhm.
because there are hundreds of thousands of flights all the time, for aircraft, and there've been, gosh, a couple hundred at most,
Mhm.
human space flights, with spacecraft.
Yep.
Um, Oh, several hundred, several hundred. We'll go with several hundred because there's 135 space shuttle missions. There's like 150 plus Soyuz missions over the years.
Mhm.
So we'll go we'll go more than 300 human spaceflight missions, versus the millions. Gosh, I hope that's right. Yeah, it has to be millions of commercial airline flights.
Right,
So,
right.
and that's not to say that Boeing gets a pass for shoddy workmanship with aircraft either, but that's
Mhm.
there's a lot going on. Besides, it's easy to blame Boeing, and you should blame Boeing because they're the final say on that one, in my personal opinion. But there's a lot
It's
more
true.
to it. There's contractors you have to deal with, because technically the this is not me making accusations at all, so don't take this out of context, anybody. But technically, the thrusters were actually designed and built by Aerojet Rocketdyne and L3 Harris Company. So
Wow.
Boeing, if they wanted to get particular, could blame these problems on Aerojet Rocketdyne and not itself. Now, to be
True.
fair, it's Boeing spacecraft. They have the buck
The
stops with
final one.
them,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
that won't get them very far. But you can say the same. They're trying to say the same thing with aircraft stuff going on with their aircraft on the ground, which is why they're actually, I think, consolidating some of the aircraft, some of these other companies that are building their parts for their aircraft. So yeah, so that's what's
That's
going
really
on with
cool though.
Starliner.
That's well,
Um,
I worry about Sunny and Butch because I don't know, you think like if they're prepared to be gone this long
it's
or
yeah, yeah, it's definitely going to be a mindset shift.
Mhm.
So There's some really good books. Um, well, there's a lot of good space books out there. And if you I listen to books instead of read books. I should read more often, but you get the same information.
I
Um,
do both.
yeah,
It's fine.
I do. Yeah, oh, Derek can't read. No. So
All right, all
no,
right.
no, I'm obviously kidding. But in particular, I think it was NASA astronaut Scott Kelly when he was up there for a year. I think he had been on the space station on a long duration mission before, but it was a 6 month mission versus a whole, almost 365 days. I think it was 300 and gosh, with 350 days he was in space. But he was
Mhm.
talking
Oh
about
wow.
how he had definitely had to do that, mindset shift to, you know, for for lack of a better
Kind of like
phrase, not yeah,
meditate.
not go crazy. Basically, you're not going crazy, obviously. He was he would talk about how the first couple of weeks are fine. After you get into a rhythm, learning, you going through the motion, you just live there. You're living there. You're working there. But
Mhm.
at some point you have to come home, and at some point the your homesickness, for lack of a better phrase,
Yeah,
that does come into play. And I think he
that's
said it
right.
was about the last third of his 6 month mission that he basically last month or two, where he started getting that feeling like I'm getting ready to come home. I'm ready to come home, and he was curious.
Yeah.
I think he basically tried to see what that would be like for his. I think my camera froze there for a second. Um,
Just a second. Yeah.
yeah, trying to see what that would be like for a full 12 months, and I think he said it was about the same duration. Even so, basically 2 to 4 months, he started to get that feeling. But it's
Like
just
the last two.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, spending a long time away from family, that's tough no matter where you're at. So on
Yep.
Earth or in space, and not to completely change the subject, but when people go to Mars someday, it's not going to be 6 months. It's not going to be a year. It's going to be possibly 3 years.
That's
So,
true.
I mean, depending on orbital mechanics, if you want to get technical, but
It's insane they're investigating Mars right now.
yeah, there's a lot going on too on Mars. Um, yeah. So there's that. What else happened while we were gone? I know I made
Oh
another
gosh.
video about the speaking of the International Space Station. I know I did another video about the did I talk about this last time? The deorbit vehicle for the ISS?
You might
I
have.
might have. We won't go back over that again. I don't want to have a repeat podcast. uh,
Um, so what is so okay, so the next step for Starliner, their conference is when is that?
um, actually, that's a good call. I don't know when the next press conference is. They've been doing more press conferences. Um,
Mhm.
I will say the fact that we're even having these discussions about the safety of the crew, whether we should bring the crew home on SpaceX, whether we should bring it home on Dragon, on
Mhm.
a Starliner. Um, that's a good sign from a culture standpoint. I think that means
Mhm.
NASA's taking safety seriously. That means there's enough voices that are speaking up or allowed to speak up. Now you can make the argument that it's overly focused on safety, and who knows? Maybe that's what's going on here. Maybe it's just a couple of people that are just overly cautious. History will tell. I don't know, but I do know that it was the exact opposite during the Columbia accident in 2003. There was not enough people. There were people that were concerned, but it did not escalate to management like it should have, or management didn't take it seriously as seriously as they should. I'm way oversimplifying for people who actually know their stuff about the Columbia accident. I know that I understand that, but it was definitely a safety culture issue, and some could argue is just like the Challenger accident as far as a schedule issue too, because we were for Challenger they were trying to push the envelope, trying to launch more space shuttles, more and more and more, because their goal was to get, I think, I think they were trying to get to 16 flights a year, And
Mhm.
in 1986 was going to be that year that they get real close. That was their plan. And there's a lot of basically go fever is the term they used that is used. The
Mhm.
and in Challenger in particular, obviously that was the one where there was a um, gosh, drawing a blank on the terms here. Um,
That's right.
an SRB seal that failed basically. I won't go
Mhm.
into all the technical details, but basically there was a burn through for the solid rocket booster that caused the structural integrity of the vehicle to fall apart once the burn through hit the external tank. And yeah, technically not an explosion, but that's really mincing words. So
Mhm.
it basically fell apart, and the cloud you saw was mostly just condensed hydrogen and oxygen and all that stuff. But either way, the whole space shuttle broke apart during the whenever basically when it was not going
Mhm.
straight like it should be. It fell apart. But
Yeah, I think I
but
remember that.
yeah, but where was I going with that? But the safety culture, they were basically saying in management that it was too cold to launch because the seals were not designed, the boosters were not designed for that level of cold that they got in Florida. It was like really really cold, like we're talking teens, I think, teens and 20s, and they were already having problems with the boosters behind the scenes as far as
Mhm.
constant burn through,
Mhm.
but nothing to the level that would cause a disaster. Or they got comfortable with it. Let's put it that way. A lot of managers got comfortable with it. They were trying to work on it, and it just wasn't a problem because they'd seen it before, per se.
Right.
And again,
Wow.
there's books you can read on this. It's a lot more complicated than that. But one, a couple of engineers actually on the day before launch, during the flight, was it a flight readiness review? One of the reviews, launch readiness review, excuse me.
Mhm.
Um, a couple of them were basically trying to prevent them from launching, and one of the NASA people actually said, "Well, goodness, I'm paraphrasing here. Thiokol was the contractor at the time for the solid rocket boosters. Um, Basically said, "Well, goodness, Thiokol, when would you have me launch next April?"
Mhm.
um,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, so there was that. That's the type of culture there was in NASA management at the time, and then Columbia. There with the foam shedding, the problem with the foam shedding is they had seen foam shedding over and over again throughout the program, and it had never
Mhm.
done the damage that some engineers were claiming had possibly happened on Columbia. The problem is they didn't know for sure because they never got imagery of that area. They didn't have a robotic arm on that shuttle mission in 2003, so they couldn't see the
Mhm.
damage. And they tried to get a military asset to go look at the orbiter,
Mhm.
from basically a satellite looking at the orbiter from space, and ultimately that was declined because they didn't have a reason to actually use it. I mean, the military I think was willing. NASA management says we don't have a conclusive reason why we should get the military involved to look at this to look at here.
Right.
So yeah,
Mhm.
basically they couldn't prove that there was a hole or damage there. So why should we go look there? Which is the kind of the wrong mindset you should have. It is a similar situation with Challenger as well. They couldn't where you should prove that it's safe to fly. That should
Mhm.
always be what the thing is. Prove that it's safe to fly,
Yep, safety
not.
first.
But in both the instances of Columbia and Challenger, it kind of shifted into a well, prove to me that it's not safe to fly. Yeah, prove to me it's not safe to fly, which is a lot harder to do, and it's not really the right mindset. So I think what's going on with Starliner is you got a lot of people who are trying to say, basically saying, prove to me, like say Boeing, for example, they're asking, Boeing, prove to me that this is safe to send our crew home.
Mhm.
I don't know
Yeah.
what's going on behind the scenes, so this is
Mhm.
just me spitballing. And Boeing seems to, from what I am understanding, seems to be believe that their vehicle is safe, and there are enough people at NASA, some people at NASA that are um, not so sure.
Right.
Not that they believe it's unsafe. They just don't know. So
Mhm.
yeah, I will continue to say, regardless of what happens, whether the crew comes home safely in September, or the crew comes home safely on another vehicle in February, it is my personal opinion, it is important to actually get Starliner working so that we have more than one way for the United States to get to the International Space Station. It's easy to say SpaceX can do it all, and they might be able to, but there was an issue in July that proved that SpaceX, as great as their engineering is, they can have problems. And they had an issue on one of their Starlink missions. Get the stars right here. On their Starlink satellite missions, their upper stage had an issue, which caused them to be grounded for, I think, 3 weeks. Which is, to be fair, that length is incredibly short. They phenomenal to get that thing back flying again. But let's say something worse had happened, and they're grounded for several months. So we were in a situation for 3 weeks, which, to be fair, this did not affect the International Space Station flight visiting vehicle schedule at all because it was so short on their grounding. But let's say had it lasted 3 months, a 3-month, stand down on flights. Crew Falcon 9 launches Crew Dragon to space station. A Falcon 9 currently launches Cygnus, the cargo vehicle, to the space station. Okay. I think, and of course, Cygnus and Cargo Dragon both launch on Falcon 9 right now. Cygnus used to launch on the Antares rocket, but because of Russia's war in Ukraine, the company that built the first stage of the rocket, I don't even know if they exist anymore technically, but either way, it was built in Ukraine, and you're not getting any rockets from there right now.
Right.
And so Northrop Grumman, who owns that rocket, is actually working with Firefly Aerospace to build a new rocket to replace that. But it's not going to be done until at least next year. So in the meantime, the Cygnus spacecraft, which was designed to fly in multiple rockets if needed, can only launch on a Falcon 9 right now. They could launch on an Atlas V, but that inventory is all booked up with because they've words. The Atlas V, the Atlas V that you saw launch, they don't make them anymore. They're a set number, and they will be retired by the end of this decade. And basically, there's a few Department of Defense missions, 5 or 6 more Starliner missions. I think it might be 5.
Yeah, I did learn about the Atlas V.
And then there's Jeff Bezos has the rest of them for his for his Kuiper internet satellite constellation. So you could, in theory, barter other rockets. That in an emergency, I'm sure something could be worked out. But technically, the only way people could have gotten to the space station from an American vehicle during that 3 weeks was technically Starliner, but they didn't have any ready, obviously, and obviously they're doing the test flights. And even then, nothing was ready. So we had no access to the space station for 3 weeks if an emergency had happened. Or if it had been for 4 months, 5 months, we would have had no American access to the International Space Station. Now, we still could have launched people on the Soyuz, which we still do. We have every Soyuz launch from Russia, from Kazakhstan technically, but from Russian assets. One American and 2 cosmonauts launch, and then they also have their Soyuz resupply vehicle. So it could have been, there would have been no problems from that side of things, but it would have been a strain on logistics. Point is, I'm not trying to dog on SpaceX because SpaceX is wonderful. Point is, we could, when you're trying to rely on one provider, you risk that happening. And the whole point, I'm going on a long tangent for this, the whole point of having 2 commercial crew vehicles is to prevent that from happening in the first place. So makes sense. As much as, and this might sound like fanboying or whatever you want to call it, it's not. It's opinion and reality. We really need Starliner to work. Boeing needs to get their act together. Basically, it needs to be safe. The next Starliner mission needs to be, for everything that's happened with Starliner over the last 3 missions, the next one needs to be flawless. There's some of these things that have happened have been embarrassing. I know I'm kind of taking all the airtime here, but basically the first Starliner, the first orbital flight test, they had software issues that prevented it from, it barely got into orbit because of that improperly set timer clock on the spacecraft, and it used up a lot of fuel and could not get to the space station. That was flight 1 uncrewed. Flight 2, before the mission, they had a lot of corrosion issues on some of their valves that they had to take and replace the service module with a new service module before they even got off the ground. Then when they got into orbit, there were several thruster issues, but for the most part, the mission went fairly smoothly. And then now we have that was flight 2, and then flight 3, which is a crew flight, you have all that's been going on. So it has not been it's not been a smooth road. I think it was Eric Berger from Ars Technica, and I know that name might trigger a lot of people because he's you either like him or you hate him. But, and as much as I was upset by some of his reporting over the last couple of weeks, he's been correct for the most part. So, but it sounds like I don't remember if it was his suggestion or what he's hearing, is it's possible the next Starliner mission, assuming Boeing doesn't cancel the whole thing, which would be a tragedy, the next Starliner mission could be an uncrewed cargo mission to prove the system works before putting people on there. So Starliner 1 would basically be uncrewed for cargo only, and then Starliner 2 would actually have the first crew rotation mission. But who knows? We probably won't know until early next year, if I had to guess. But
I never expect a crew flight test to go smoothly, though. You kind of want it to go badly so they can
oh yeah, I agree.
In a way.
Yes.
Not put
I
the astronauts in danger, but like I know it hasn't been a smooth ride, but I also don't want to judge Boeing, and like it's supposed to be kind of rough.
I do believe the people working on it are dedicated.
The
problem is I don't know how dedicated upper level Boeing management is. I'm not talking space. I'm not talking Boeing space management level. I'm talking corporate. They've already it was a fixed price contract, which I mean, I think they got other money in other ways, but basically anytime they mess up, they're basically covering the money. So I think they've had to have lost more than $1 billion on the Starliner project already.
They kind of need it, though, like you said.
Well,
we need the
America
commercial.
needs it. Boeing doesn't.
Is Boeing not American?
Well, no. Let me rephrase that. When I say America, NASA, we need this from a capability standpoint. From Boeing's bottom line, they don't need that. If that makes sense. Now it's going to be embarrassing.
You think we would want the same thing? Like we would be on the same side?
You would think, but they also have, and this will come down. A lot of people say this is part of the problem. They have a lot of shareholders they gotta appease to as well.
It's true.
There's a lot going on there. You would think, but sometimes it's all about the money. And I think Boeing initially, and again, this is me speculating, it's possible that Boeing thought they had this in the bag. They were the favorite. Back when it was first chosen, all the way back in, they'd been involved with the effectively early pre-commercial crew program since 2011. And they were selected, I don't remember the exact year they were selected officially to be a commercial crew provider, the one of the two, SpaceX and Boeing. I think that was in 2014 they were chosen. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was right around there. But Boeing got twice as much as SpaceX from a funding level. And I think Congress really wanted NASA to choose one spacecraft, not two, but NASA stood its ground. Well, it's a little more complicated. There's politics involved there, but they basically, there were enough people in Congress to allow NASA to choose two providers. I think Congress wanted Boeing, and they got that. And the next one was SpaceX. And at that time, this is before all this stuff going on with Elon Musk nowadays. So he was a lot more less controversial back then. Let's put it that way. Just so, at least vocally, I don't know. Maybe he was always this way, but yeah, I don't want to get into that, but but they are right off the heels of the very successful commercial cargo program that was, with the Cargo Dragon and all that stuff. And
Mhm.
so it was a fan favorite. It was cheaper, but NASA was pressured to pick Boeing, I think. And then, of course, thankfully, they were able to choose SpaceX as the second one. And SpaceX, like I said, got half as much as Boeing, and they got done 4 years earlier than Boeing. All of them were late. They were supposed to launch by 2017. SpaceX didn't launch until 2020, and Boeing arguably still hasn't gotten. Well, their first crew launch was this year. We'll just leave it at that. But so it's
Got you. So
yeah,
that's their look. Word. Um,
yeah.
hmm.
Oops, that was loud.
So yeah, I think Boeing needs to invest a little bit more because I feel like if Butch and Sunny heard that it was all
Well,
about the money, I feel like they'd feel a little differently.
yeah. Well, they trust the engineers. They work with the engineers.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely. I would
I think
trust
the
the
vehicle
engineers,
it's
but like you said, the corporate
yeah, it's not like corporates
people.
going through and cutting corners or anything like that
Mhm.
necessarily. They're not going through. We don't need those straps. You can get rid of those. They're not doing that. There's probably a I don't know. I'm sure there'll be a report someday about what's going on with all this. Actually, the Government Accountability Office or NASA Office of Inspector General will probably in the next couple of years have a nice report over this. But
Oh, yep, the
yeah,
Starliner report coming in hot.
yeah, basically, careful what you say. Don't say that. We don't want them to come in hot.
Oh,
uh,
true.
yeah,
Well, for a safe
yeah, I
landing.
know, I know. There'll be. I honestly, my prediction, if they come home without the crew, I still think Starliner will land perfectly safe. But I have no reason. I have no data for that. I'm not in the conversations. It's just my gut feeling. But
I have that gut feeling too.
so does that mean that NASA should put them in the spacecraft? I don't know. That's above my pay grade. I can't make that decision. I envy the people that have to make that decision. So and Butch and Suni will do what they're told, and I don't mean that like the mindless robot thing. They're professionals. That's what they do. And
Because
if
they can manually um fly Starliner, right?
yeah, they can, and I think that was part of the problem with the overheating as well. Why did we see
Hmm.
this in this vehicle and not the uncrewed vehicle? It's
Hmm.
because I think when they were doing a lot of manual controlling, they were doing a lot more pulses,
Hmm.
thruster pulses
True.
than
Yeah.
the other vehicle, and that was probably adding a lot of heat to the system. And in those
Hmm.
doghouses, they're insulated because space, but it might have actually been keeping too much heat in, so there's not enough cooling.
So they can't, yeah, so they
Yeah,
can't
and so that
manually time it.
possibly causes the Teflon seals to overheat, which might also cause some of the propellant to vaporize a little bit, which creates uh, propellant imbalance. And then you have thrusters, the computers that turn them off, or honestly, if you have bad, there's a lot worse things that could happen too than just the computer shutting it off. But yeah,
So mission control can't even do any, like ground control can't even do anything.
no, no, well, if what were you asking? I'm trying to understand here.
Not so if Starliner were to get controlled by
Oh,
mission control,
yeah, they
like
could.
ground
Yeah, the
control.
ground can still do inputs and all that stuff. Although
Okay.
there's talk about whether those parameters were set in the first place. That's a whole nother thing about the
Hmm.
software. It sounds like they've been spending the last couple of weeks updating the software. The software
Hmm.
can undock autonomously and do
Okay.
autopilot, for lack of a better phrase. It
Right.
sounds like those parameters were to I guess unchecked effectively. The software
Uh,
is there, it's not configured for it. So they had to go through
right.
the software and configure it. And so
Mm.
they
Okay.
updated if they haven't already, they're planning on updating the software and then checking it on the ground, double checking it, and probably triple and
Mhm.
quadruple checking it to make sure they don't put faulty software
That
updates
makes
up there.
sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Because the last thing you want is they can undock the thing passively, but the last thing you want is they undock the thing and it's just dead.
Yeah, you don't
So
want that.
yeah, that would
Okay,
be a
cool.
bad day.
I was wondering if they could still do it from like ground
Yeah,
control.
but it doesn't really matter if a thruster fails and they can't get the thruster back online.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they can still work remotely to try to command thrusters to pulse and see if they can get them to come
Mm-hmm.
back online if it came down to it. But yeah, so that's Starliner.
I'll see. We'll see. I guess in the next press conference, what happens.
Yeah, like I said, sometime this week, and unless one has been announced, I bet we don't hear. I bet tomorrow morning there isn't a scheduled one already. I'm not aware of. Is there? Let me check.
I can look on Twitter.
Space station updates.
X.
Oh yeah, there's another more positive news. A Russian Progress cargo ship docked to the space station on Saturday morning.
Oh wow.
More supplies. Um, yeah, I don't think there is any update on a press conference, but I wouldn't be surprised if on Monday morning we get a notification for probably a Wednesday press conference. Just a guess. And I bet it's probably going to be more of a not update press conference. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Just
Mm-hmm.
just to keep people give people at a minimum give reporters a chance to ask more questions if they want, if there is no new information. So um so yeah.
We'll be steadily waiting then.
Yep.
Let's go, Starliner. Either way, we're rooting for Butch and Sunny.
Oh yeah, they'll make it back. This is, I don't know for sure if this will end up being their last flight before they retire, but neither one have been in space for like 10 years. They were looking forward to coming back up to the space station, and as hard as it will be to be away from, if they end up being away for an additional 6 months, especially if it's their last flight, that's an additional 6 months they didn't plan on to be up on ISS. So
yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah. So they'll if it's their last flight, what a way to end your career. So your astronaut career.
I hope they're making the best of it.
Oh, I'm sure they're, again, family and being away from family aside, I'm sure they're having a blast up there.
I know I would.
Lots of science, and there's Matthew Dominic is part of the Crew 8 mission. He's I don't know if you follow him on Facebook or on Twitter.
I think I do on X. Yeah.
He's got a lot of really good photographs that he's been doing. A lot of the aurora and everything. It's been
I've seen his pictures.
Beautiful photos.
I love seeing all the pictures.
Yeah. Now, Don, to shift into the more space station news, NASA astronaut Don Pettit is going up on a Soyuz later next month. He hasn't been up there for a long time either, but he is also an avid photographer. And he has got a lot of plans for taking some really phenomenal photos. So on Earth, you've got an equatorial mount you can put to follow the rotation of the Earth to track the stars, so you can keep your stars still.
I've seen that, yeah.
You can't do that on the space station because the way those work is it rotates every 24 hours.
Right.
And you have a 92 minute orbit for the International Space Station, so it doesn't quite work that way. So he's made a custom one that he can modify a little bit depending on their orbit. So he's a
nerd.
Yes, so tinkering with it in his garage basically. And so his goal, or one of his many photography goals, is to put that device with a camera in one of the windows and track the stars as the space station is rotating around the Earth. Because it stays on a normal orbit, it stays level with the Earth because of the gyroscopes and all that stuff.
Right.
And so he's going to try to get a nice still photo of the space station and the stars. I don't think he'll be able to get a still photo of the Earth since it'll be moving below them. But but yeah.
When is he going up?
September. Oh gosh, September. Let me check my website.
So it's like next. That's next.
Yeah, it's because September 11th. September 11th is when he's scheduled to launch, and he'll be on a fast track to space station. him and his two Russian cosmonaut colleagues will get to the space station, I think, in like 2 orbits. They'll launch, and
Oh,
2 orbits
wow.
later they'll be on the space station, assuming everything
Is
goes
that
normally.
is that fast?
That is very fast. It's not the. It is the fastest profile they use now. I don't know if it'll be a
Hmm.
record. If it is a record, it'll be by minutes. But but
Oh,
yes,
wow.
it used to, the standard orbital profile for a Soyuz to get to space station, if they're not working to make everything perfect on orbital alignments, is about 34 orbits, or about
Oh,
two days.
wow.
2 days.
Right.
But
Okay.
they over the last decade they've been narrowing that down. It was first 6 orbits, and then it was 3 orbits, and now they're doing 2 orbits. And yeah,
Insane. And now is that because of engines or rockets or
I
like
think
what's the difference?
it's mostly since I honestly think it's mostly just to get them there faster. Otherwise, the Soyuz is very small. It is incredibly small. So um, imagine 3 large people in pressure suits. It doesn't have to be large. Just 3 normal sized people in pressure suits. So
Worked for me because I'm
sorry,
4'11", so
but
thanks for that one.
sorry. um, but but imagine the chair you're in. You've got a gamer chair. It's probably similar to the one I've got.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, for
Now
sure.
imagine you're sitting there, but your knees are up closer to you, but you're also
Hmm.
wearing a big pressure suit, and you've got 3 people as close as they can put you to get to
Right.
you, and you're kind of huddled all together, and that's what you're launching in. Um,
Like gosh.
you're launching in that, and I'm trying to think what the diameter of Soyuz is. Gosh,
Does it
it's
have like a rocket, like a Atlas V engine or what?
well, yeah, it launches. The Soyuz spacecraft launches on a Soyuz rocket. um,
Okay, okay.
yeah, um,
So it's got its own rocket.
yeah,
Okay,
but the
cool.
Soyuz spacecraft is 3 parts. You got the service module, you got the
Hmm.
crew capsule,
Hmm.
they call it the descent module, and then you have the orbital module. The orbital module is also pretty small, but when you're in your seat in launch configuration, you're pretty
Hmm.
much imagine 3 people in a small car in the front seat row,
Right.
in your suit and everything
Okay.
right there. You got
Yeah.
your steering wheels, your console. That's all
It's
your
like a
controls.
clown car.
Kind of a
Yeah.
clown car, and so you're sitting there for launch. And
Mm.
if you in the 34 orbit rendezvous profile, you have the time to get out of your suit and go up to the orbital module, which is just a little bit bigger. So you get to use the back seat
Oh
of the
my
car,
gosh.
basically. But that's where
Just
you're,
go from the front seat to
yeah,
the back
yeah.
seat.
It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not by much. And so your back seat's where your toilet is. It's where you get to change the little privacy, all that stuff. The back seat's also where your
Wow.
docking port is, basically, if using the car analogy. So, but
Like a truck
yeah,
driver.
exact. It's very tiny, and those 3 people, if you can get them to the space station faster, there might be some. I don't even know if there's a there. I don't even know if there's a fuel advantage. There might be a fuel advantage. Somebody can correct me on that one, but I think it's
So you're
mostly.
just like this tiny thing going, phew.
Yep,
We're there.
yep.
Like
Basically, now because you're going to be at space station in 3 hours, um,
that's insane.
you're you don't have time to get out of your pressure suit or anything like that. So you're in your
Hmm.
pressure suit doing all these. A lot of them are automated, but you're still probably the commander's probably still flipping switches or whatnot.
Just doing their stuff, yeah.
They're so far back that they actually have a stick.
Stop it.
A stick, flip stick,
No
if you
way,
will. So,
stop.
um, mostly, I think it's mostly used for launch, but because when you're sitting back in your seat, you can't reach up and flip switches, so they have a little stick that they can use and pull
That's kind
things
of
up and flip
funny.
it.
Like,
So,
okay, Grandpa.
so, but
That's
yeah,
funny.
they'll be at space station in about 3 hours, assuming nothing goes wrong with their engines or something, because something could happen, and if something off nominal happens, they'll have to default back to the 34 orbit rendezvous profile. But
That's
not the
insane.
end of the world. You're just stuck in your car for 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
But once you get to space station,
Stuck in your car.
yeah, once you're in, you can't go out because there's no air outside your car.
True.
So
Oh man.
there's only 2 windows in your car too, 2 porthole windows about that big on either side. So
Weird.
I guess technically there's a periscope too, but yeah. So that's the
Only 3
Soyuz.
hours though.
Only 3 hours. Yeah, that's a trip across state for you. So
Yeah, that's not too
it's not
bad.
too bad. You can do that, and you get out and you want to make a
I'd do
big
that.
stretch afterwards.
Absolutely.
but
Yep.
and then of course once you dock to space station, you have to spend a couple hours um, uh, pressurizing the vestibule.
Decompressing or
Well,
decompression.
there's the space between the space station and the Soyuz. When you dock, you still have a small area that is vacuum that you have to repressurize, and so they have to get the pressures right there before they can open both hatches. That takes a couple
That's
hours.
cool. Yep.
But in the
I do
meantime,
remember that.
yeah, in the meantime, they can still get out of their suits and get on their flight suit and all that stuff, and
Nice.
stretch a little bit.
Yeah, I remember the Starliner going through that.
Yeah, same idea. There's a little more room in Starliner though.
True.
Yeah, a lot more room.
Just like, oh, okay.
Actually, hold on. I have props.
Let's see the models.
You. There we go. Like for those that want to see, I have a model of the space station up here.
I am
So-
those that want to see.
Did you see it?
Oh wait,
Oh,
sorry,
yeah,
no.
Right here.
Oh, that, yeah,
It's
for
not
sure.
finished,
That's
obviously,
the space
but yeah.
station.
Yep.
See your patches out there.
Excuse
too.
me. So I just plucked the Starliner off. And this is
There's
to
the
scale.
sucker.
This is the Soyuz. And so
Oh my gosh, yep,
so-
that is a lot smaller.
so you have this is the propulsion module, the service module right here, this part
Mhm.
where the solar panels are. And this part
Right.
in the middle here between my hands, the fingers, that's the descent module where the crew launches, and that's also where the crew lands too. And that will re-enter Earth at the end of the mission. And this upper bulging part here, this little round piece, that is
crew cabin.
that's the oops, I just broke this. That's the
Okay.
orbital. That's the orbital module. That's what docks to the space station. And so you can
Oh,
see,
okay, cool.
so you can see the size difference here.
It's very tiny.
So yeah,
The circumference is a little bit bigger.
4 people are designed. This, hang on, focus.
4 people?
Focus. There we go. If it focuses someday. 4 people are.
There we go. Oh wait.
4 people are designed to fly in this vehicle. To be fair, it could probably hold 7. A maximum of 3 can fly in that.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Which one does more missions?
Oh, this one has only done 1 crewed mission so far.
That's what
And then this one has done, gosh, it's got to be 150, 160 crewed missions over the years, over the decades.
There you go.
I'll put these back. I'll put them back on the space station
Hoping more.
later today. But
Those are
so
cute.
yeah. Paper model 1/100 scale. You can find those at axmpaperspace.scale-models.com. Not sponsored. So,
Get that.
so what's that?
You said you get that.
Yeah. No, Alfonso. I don't remember his last name actually, but AXM is his initials, and he's the guy that does a lot of these paper models, including that space station you saw up there. Of course, I'm working on my own model of. At the same scale, you've got a Haven 1 model of a space station that might go up someday. You have the Cygnus module. And, oh, by the way, size comparison again with Starliner and Cygnus. So. And then.
It is insane.
Oh, and again, size comparison with Orion. Oops. Not a really good Orion model, but you get the idea. Oops, come on.
I never
Just
noticed.
trying to focus on my face, and then there it is with that. So it's a similar
They're
size.
similar.
This is like 4.5, and this is 5 meters, something like that.
So funny. So I always wondered why these shuttles and these rockets were shaped like they were until I saw the model of the ISS
Mhm.
and they're all like connected. And I'm
Yep.
like, oh,
Yep.
the shapes, they make sense now.
And then I'm
Mhm.
currently, and I've said this for a while, but I'm trying to get one done. I have a gateway The Lunar Gateway, have
Hmm.
a video that I'm working on ideally this week. I've got a
That's
lot of
cool.
animations and graphics I'm working on, basically
Hmm.
talking about the latest government accountability report. Apparently, the two main modules, the two first modules of the Lunar Gateway, which will launch atop a Falcon Heavy,
Mm.
are overweight, amongst other
Oh no.
problems. So, in fact,
What the heck?
one of the problems is the Habitation and Logistics Outpost or Halo module apparently is overweight by like 600 kilograms because somebody miscalculated the mass of wire ties.
Oh my gosh. Who
That's a
did
lot of wire
this?
ties. That's a lot. That's a little bit of a difference. That's a half a ton, over a half a ton,
Oh
metric
my
ton.
gosh. What
But
happened?
I have no idea. But anyway, here's my prototype initial capability lunar gateway that I'm
Mhm.
working on. Paper model. That
Cool.
this one is mine, not Alfonso's. Um, and someday soon, I'll have this available for people to actually, you know, download and put together themselves. I'm working on
Nice.
the lunar habitation, the lunar international habitation
Hmm.
module, which will go up on the Artemis 4 mission alongside Orion crew, and that will be actually the way that'll work is it'll go
Is
up
that
on
that habitat thing we saw when we
um
went to Kennedy Space Center? It was like that habitat
you're talking
life.
about at the it's similar, it's smaller,
Is it? Okay.
it's
I forgot
smaller.
what it's
The
called.
real one is smaller. But this will sit on in the payload bay, the payload area, cargo area of an upgraded Space
Mhm.
Launch System rocket, and then Orion will be on top. And then once Orion
That's cute.
departs, it'll turn around and let's see if I can get this right here.
Oh my gosh.
Uh, there we go. It'll. It's not again. These are prototypes, people.
It's a
It'll
good
so yeah.
prototype.
It's
What you
not
mean?
quite properly angled. So but it'll tow
Still
it the
so
rest of the
good.
way to the space station, to the moon, and it'll line up in a near rectilinear halo orbit and meet up with the gateway, and then it will make sure I get this right here. It will dock, and this will be the first. This will be the first crewed space station in lunar orbit.
So cool.
No earlier than probably 2028.
Oh
uh,
wow. Okay. That's not
Probably,
too far.
maybe. That's a whole nother thing. That's other things I'll be talking about in that video coming up. A little teaser is this first mission has a baseline launch of December of 2027.
Mhm.
It's going to take about a year to get out to the orbit that it needs to get, possibly longer. This on Artemis 4 is supposed to launch no earlier than December of so be September of 2028.
Okay.
That means there's a gap of what is that? October, November, 3 months of when this
Mhm.
won't be in place. Obviously,
Right.
not that big of a deal because they can try to accelerate this timeline. We'll see,
Mhm.
but the odds of this launching by 2028 probably pretty remote anyway. Um, they still have to finish an upgraded upper stage for the SLS rocket. So
Mhm.
who knows? We got several political cycles to get through before that even comes, and funding cycles to get through before we're even there yet. But this will be the first segments of the Lunar Gateway.
That's
Um,
really cool.
and then I have a whole. I'm planning on building the whole thing out, which will include. Hang on, we get here without letting it fall apart. Um, the there we go. We can see. Everybody can see. Come on. Maybe I should put this to manual control here. Hang on. Hopefully I don't mess anything up. Oops. Nope. Come on. Manual. There we go. I can just manually.
There we go.
There we go.
Maybe
Think we're good. And
a
move it in and out.
little.
There
There
we
we
go.
go.
So this is the power and propulsion element. This is the habitation and logistics outpost, the second one here, or Halo. So PPE, the first one, and Halo. This
That's cute.
is the Lunar International Habitation Module, or Lunar IHAB. And this is good. So this is the first one here is built by Maxar Technologies. The second
Mhm.
one is being built by Northrop Grumman. And these are, by the
Oh
way,
wow.
based off of the Cygnus module.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I
at
look
least partially,
familiar.
yeah. The prime contractor for the hull is
Mhm.
Thales Alenia Space in Turin, Italy. Um,
Mhm.
and then
Oh,
this
wow.
is going to be built by the European Space Agency, the Lunar IHAB. And so,
Mhm.
again, like I said, that'll be initial capability. So when Orion docks, there'll be 4 people on it, and then 2 people will stay in Gateway, and 2 people will actually take a lunar lander. This on Artemis 4, it'll be lunar's SpaceX's lunar starship, and that's a whole other
Mhm.
problem I'll talk about in the video about controllability issues. Because let's be real,
Yeah.
you know how big Starship is, right?
Mhm.
This is small
It's-
compared to Starship.
Yeah, it's
Like
tiny.
my bottle here is still smaller than this at this scale is still smaller than
That's
Starship.
insane. Mhm.
So so it's
That's so
yeah.
tiny.
So it would be docked to one of these ports, but then those 2 people would go to the lunar South Pole probably for about
Mhm.
6 days, and then they come back and then they undock. Oops, undock and go home. But over the course of several missions in the later this decade and the early part of the
Mhm.
2030s, there will be additional modules added. You'll have on this side right here a lunar view, say my V's properly, lunar view as in looking out the window module.
That's
That will
cool.
also have some extra fuel on it as well, but at the very top we'll have a bunch of windows where you can look out. Because if you notice in this, there's no windows on this spacecraft so far.
Mhm.
So it'll be the
That's
first
true.
windows on that. Of course, Orion has
Yeah.
windows, but so
Okay.
there'll be windows here, and then another module
Mhm.
will be launched called, and the lunar view is also going to be built by the European Space Agency and the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center of the United Arab Emirates, I believe.
Mhm.
Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong there. It will be designing the crew and oh gosh, basically an airlock that will go right here.
That's
So it'll be
insane.
similar in shape and size to the habitation module, but it'll go right here on top,
Mhm.
basically
Mhm.
like this. Um,
It's not even its final form.
yeah, exactly.
It's about to go
And
Gear 5 Luffy.
exactly. So I want to get that whole project done in the next couple of weeks, so people can download it and build it and so on and so forth.
That's
Um,
cool.
but there'll also be a
I
robotic
can
arm.
say the mod.
Hmm?
Oh, really? I was gonna say the models are really cool for
Yeah,
like engineers or
yeah,
like
yeah.
upcoming
Um,
engineers.
and the best thing about paper models is they're cheap. It takes a while to
Mhm.
build, obviously, but for the person building it, you just have to have ink and paper. And if you want to go above and beyond, you can buy magnets and do magnets and glue and make them magnetically connect. But
That's cool.
but if you didn't want to spend the money on magnets, you can just glue the modules together and make it permanent. So that's always that. And I have a stand I'm working on so that you can stand it on things. Um,
Do you do 3D printing?
I don't, not yet.
Not yet.
Someday
Okay,
I'll get
gotcha.
there. Someday I'll get there, but one few things at a time here. This would probably be good to 3D print, but at that point I'd probably sell them a la carte, that way.
Yep,
That's a lot more work though.
it
Not that
is.
this isn't a lot of work. There's a lot of
Uh,
work too, but
it's yeah, just two
so
different
yeah,
avenues
exactly.
for sure.
But then there's a robotic arm called Canadarm 3 because it'll be the third iteration of Canada's robotic system. The Canadarm
That's
1,
cool.
or just Canadarm, was on the space shuttle.
Canada.
Canadarm 2, I'm going to put this down now. Canadarm
Yeah, we do.
2, and I'm going to put the autofocus back on. Come on. There we go. There we go. Focused again. Canadarm 2 is on the International Space Station. And then, of course, Canadarm
Nice.
3 will be on the Lunar Gateway.
Fun.
So, yeah.
That's
Now,
cool. So what
Gateway,
does that do?
it'll be there to do a lot of things that astronauts can't do or shouldn't do in deep space. And also, the Lunar Gateway is not going to be crewed 24/7 like the International Space Station. It'll be, at first
Mhm.
anyway, several weeks at a time. So if you have one mission that lasts, let's say the Artemis 4 mission is only 2 weeks long. It might be longer, I don't know. So you have at most less than 2 weeks because you got to think about the transit time to get there. So we'll say a week or two at the space station for the first few Artemis missions. with it. At some point, you might be able to, get several month-long missions, but it will be intermittently crewed. And so the time that it is not crewed, it'll be autonomous, and having the
That's
ability
cool.
to use the robotic arm on the outside of the space station in deep space will be critical to possibly doing any maintenance and repair, depending on what's
That's really
needed.
cool.
So
Let's go.
so yeah,
Canadarm.
yes. So that's my next video that I'm working on. It's not not about all of the gateway. It's mostly going to be about
Mhm.
the problems with the initial capability of the gateway, which
Oh no.
like I said, is the mass issues, the controllability issues. Because when Gateway was first designed, they did not. They had a government reference design for a lunar lander, which was
Mhm.
small. It was a small
Oh
lander
wow.
because that was before SpaceX had decided to put in their single stage to orbit, single stage to the moon, single stage back lunar Starship,
Mhm.
which is a ginormous vehicle, arguably
Right.
way overpowered for the Artemis program, um, but has a lot of future potential. Um,
Mhm.
uh, and because it's so big, the power and propulsion element, the PPE, the one with the big solar panels, that's
Mhm.
supposed to control the whole stack. And as things stand now, it won't be able to control, probably won't be able to control the whole stack if one of the landers is docked. So they have some options to get around that. One of them is just to get really efficient with your thruster pulses. um, the other option is to um, use the other vehicles when they're docked to help with attitude control. So I'm
Mhm.
sure they'll get that solved, but
That
it
makes
was
sense.
designed. The requirements were made in this weird time that we're in, where we're kind of in this, for deep space exploration anyway, this transition
Mhm.
from mostly government run to government private partnerships. And I think because of the speed at which we were trying to push for things in the early 20s, the 2020 time frame or so, when we were originally pushing to try to be on the moon by 2024, which we're gonna miss that.
No, yeah. Where are
uh,
we? Almost
um,
there.
but because of that, a lot of things were rushed, and eventually we we wanted to give more leeway. Basically, wanted the commercial crew program, but for the lunar
Mhm.
landers, and we
Mhm.
gave the companies a lot of flexibility, and they all designed gigantic landers. And by that time, the
I
contracts were already written for the power and propulsion element, so you're kind of stuck with what you got.
was gonna
So
say, yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could scrap it and redesign things for the new landers, but then that adds cost, because
Yep.
and that also adds time. And at some point, are you ever going to go back to the moon? So
Mhm.
so people complain, why aren't we
There's that
just doing this in
question.
lower people? Why aren't we just going to low lunar orbit for the moon? Well, that's because this little thing can't get to low
Mhm.
lunar orbit. This service module can they probably could get down to low lunar orbit, but then they'd be stuck in low lunar orbit. That's why we're going to this
Stop.
highly elliptical orbit around the moon. Why would they design a spacecraft like that? Well, it was not designed to go to low lunar orbit. It was designed in another program, the asteroid redirect mission, which was originally supposed to go into a distant retrograde orbit around the moon to rendezvous with an asteroid that we lassoed. That we never
I think I
did.
remember that
Yeah,
mission.
that was
They,
The Obama
yeah,
administration. That was their
I
kind
do
of,
remember
yeah.
that. It was like they're sending something to an
So
asteroid.
so
That's
so where does
cool.
the gateway come in? Why do we need the gateway? Well, if you look at this power and propulsion element here,
Yes, Derek, please tell us.
it's all connected. This power and propulsion element, these thrusters in the back are solar electric propulsion. They are the
That's
most powerful
insane.
solar electric propulsion engines ever designed. I don't remember the exact thrust that they got, but they're very powerful for what they do. That's why you have these large solar panels. But it wasn't designed for a space station originally, this whole concept. This was designed, at least the solar electric propulsion, it was designed around the idea of taking a claw or a capture device, instead of this halo module right here, you had this effectively kind of a claw in a bag. It was
Mhm.
going to go and find an asteroid. We were supposed to look for an asteroid. I don't think NASA never actually found an asteroid within a good distance within the time frames that they were given. So, but the idea was to go find an
Oops.
asteroid or a piece of an asteroid, a boulder, small boulder,
Right.
grab it,
Anything really.
bag it, and tag it, basically,
True.
and then use the solar electric propulsion, sync up the pag real tight so it's, you know,
Bring
they
it
can
back to
control
the
it,
evidence room.
exactly, and then propel that asteroid, pretend this is the asteroid, all the way to the moon into
So
a
cool.
distant retrograde orbit around the moon. What was the first mission
Right.
for Artemis? Artemis 1 took Orion into a distant retrograde orbit around
Yeah,
the
I was gonna
moon.
say.
That's why it was originally designed for that. And that also, it's a good orbit to test things out too, to be fair. But so yes. And so why do we have Lunar Gateway with this propulsion module? Well, because we are already designing something like that. Why do we even have a space station? Well, the idea of this orbit that we can get to is it's going to be a rendezvous point for landers to, ideally originally was supposed to be landers to be built up, your multiple stage landers, and they can build them in that on the space station. But now they're both
Mhm.
Blue Origin and SpaceX are basically one spaceship. Well, they're two spaceships, but they're one spaceship each. Um, and
That's
so
insane.
yeah. So yeah, there's
That's
reasons why we
cool.
have this. Is it the best designed program? If you were designing a program from scratch, would you design it this way? Arguably no. But if you were to design a program from scratch, we'd never be here. We wouldn't be here now. We would still be talking about, you know, what are we going to do with the SLS rocket? We'd still be years behind in making landers and all that stuff.
You gotta
So
take that first step.
yeah. Now some argue we should completely scrap the gateway. I disagree because the gateway's good. It's an easy orbit to allow international partners to bring them along. They can build some modules. They can attach it. It's a good place for deep space research. Again, it comes down to what your goals are. You know, if your goal is to do deep space research, this makes sense. If your goal is just to get to the surface of the moon, some would argue some call this a toll booth to go to the moon. It's a derogatory
That's a good way
term,
to put it.
but
Mhm.
you know, I get it. But this can also teach us how to make a Mars transit habitat, a habitat that we can use based off of this design, what we learn from it over the next 10 to 15 years. You can assemble a new one with this, and then you can launch a crew from the Mars transit habitat at the gateway. Or actually, you can use that Mars transit habitat to test out your time delay and how independent can that crew stay as you pretend you're going to Mars for 6 months, and have your 30-minute calm delay, and if something does break, you're right next to a fully functional spacecraft and you can go home real quick if you need to.
It's
but
true.
but you can eventually see this being used with a similar version attached with another with the Mars transit spacecraft, and then you can use that based on everything we learned with Gateway to travel to Mars, to get to Mars with your lander and all that stuff too. So it all connects. There's a plan for it,
Let's go
but
to
people
Mars.
people just disagree with the best way to execute it. And the problem is there's no perfect way, because you run into problems with time, money, um, politics, yeah, the whole 9 yards there. Oh, politics, you can't get rid of it. So
Like thrusters can get in the way.
and I don't know if this is a good video. Maybe you can tell me if this is a good idea or not, or people in the comments and who have listened to this in the future. In October, I'm planning on writing it before then, obviously, but I'm hoping to publish in October some sort of video detailing the possible space policies for the two presidential candidates. Yeah,
Mhm.
I know I have my own views on politics. That's kind of hard. It's a sticky subject because people have their hardcore opinions. I'll keep it as fact based as possible,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
it's kind of a very. If you guys think it's a good idea, let me know. But just kind of, I want it to be informing, because what would a Harris administration space policy look like, and what would a Trump administration, the second Trump administration space policy look like, and to give
Sure.
you a little preview of what I'm thinking, at least.
Do they even have
Oh, to be fair,
that
space
information
is not
out?
going to be a priority on either campaign. In the campaign, at least, it's not going to be.
Mhm.
It rarely is, but you might get some hints here and there. But and there's obviously people who can influence either administration going forward as
Right.
well. But again, this is just preliminary thought process here, so the video
Mhm.
could change. But we know what happened with NASA under the first Trump administration. So we kind of have an idea what could happen under the second Trump administration. And this is not me endorsing either candidate, by the way. uh, but I'm just telling you
I'm
how.
neutral,
Yeah, I'm
so
trying to just basically saying I'm trying to walk on a fine edge, a line here, trying not to offend anybody. And yeah,
absolutely.
and it's possible somebody might disagree with my analysis here, and that's totally fine. Feel free to disagree with it. I feel that a second Trump administration, um, for lack of better, there's a lot of chaos in there was a lot of chaos in the first Trump administration, but he remember I talked about all those parts and how they all came together under the Artemis program because of different programs. We've been working on this moon program since 2004. It was
Mhm.
Constellation, and it was the asteroid redirect, and now it's Artemis.
Mhm.
They're all just reincarnations and reorganizations of existing projects. Um, it would not surprise me because when Artemis was first announced in 2019, it was not a month and a half, 2 months later, where Donald Trump had said, why are we wanting to go back to the moon? Why aren't we just going on to Mars? Even though it was his space policy directive to go back to the moon.
Mhm.
So it would not surprise me, depending on who's influencing, and I don't mean this in a like who's pulling the strings. Just people are influenced in politics. It's just the way it works. But depending on who's influencing a hypothetical second Trump administration, there's a chaos factor in there, and they might just say, let's stop going to the moon and let's go to Mars.
Mhm.
That could be a you guys decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. I think it would be throwing everything into chaos, and I think he would be unique in NASA space policy if this happened, if this hypothetical thing happened. It would be unique in the fact that his first administration created the Artemis program, and his second administration could effectively cancel the Artemis program. um,
Oh yeah, like cancel
cancel
each other.
cancel is not the right word here because again, reorganize is probably the better word into possibly a Mars program, which means we wouldn't be landing on the moon this decade. We'd just be skipping it and going on to Mars, which means everything would be pushed off another 5 to 10 years. If that happened. Now, some would argue that SpaceX's Starship is ready to go to Mars. I disagree with that, but I will be glad to be wrong if that's the case. So, whether you like that idea or not, I think that's a likely outcome, a possible likely outcome for a second Trump administration. Now, for a Harris administration, that's a lot harder. Um, she's is the chair of the National Space Council, which has only met 3 times. She does like space, but I don't believe her administration will prioritize space. I think we'll have a continuation of the existing Artemis program as is, with all of its problems and so on and so forth. That being said, on either side, they can propose whatever they want. That's not how government works. That's only part of government. Congress has final say, and they control the purse. So, um, so when it comes to all the struggles that the Artemis program is having now, you can stem that down to lack of funding because of congressional allocations. In the last 2 years in particular, we've had I forgot the name of the bill, but they organized. They basically agreed. The Republicans and Democrats agreed to stick to 2022 levels for 2023, and
Mm.
I think 1% above that. I might be wrong on the number there. Like 1% above that for the 2024 level. So NASA got squeezed, not even enough to keep up with inflation. So it's effectively a cut for NASA the last 2 years. Is that a Democrat administration fault? Is that the Republicans' fault? You decide. But that's the reality of the budget situations that we're in right now. That ends this year, this fiscal year. Fiscal year 2025, I think it's that, does not have that problem. Was it fiscal year 25? No, fiscal year 25 has that problem. I'm getting this off. It was 23. Sorry. Fiscal year, everybody's got like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about politics. No, I'm getting the numbers wrong. I think it was fiscal year
It's okay.
2024 that had to keep it at 23 levels. In fiscal year 25, which I
Mhm.
think they're working on now, is
Mhm.
going to be 1% above that, something like that. Either way, it's not good. It's constraining NASA and a lot of other places too. A lot of other non-discretionary spending is hurting right now too.
Mhm.
So starting with fiscal year 2026, is when they're no longer under those constraints. And so whomever is president next, based on their first budget proposal that comes out in February, actually since the inaugurations, it probably won't come out till April of next year, then we'll get a good idea of where either side really wants to try to push NASA as far as direction is concerned. But Congress, again, will have the final say. Congress could go look at a Mars plan, for example, and say, nah, no, we're not changing all this because you want to use Starship because Elon said so. We're going to still use SLS rocket because we have constituents that want that to happen. That is very likely too. So who knows? But yeah. So yeah, it's something I'm working on in my head at least. What do you think would be a good idea to make a video about that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you get more information
Yeah.
and April comes around.
Well, it would be released in October before the presidential election.
Oh well, yeah, you can do one of those.
Yeah.
And then
It would be
do another one.
because I want to try to inform people. I don't want to influence people per se.
Still do the information one, and then I think it'd be a good idea to maybe like do another one when April comes around.
Yeah, well, yeah, especially at the first budget of the new administration, depending on what they say. I will preface if it is the second Trump administration, the current NASA administrator Bill Nelson will be resigning effectively January 20th. That's just normal. That's what they do. It was during the first Trump administration, after Charlie Bolden resigned, because it makes sense, to be fair. It's you serve at the pleasure of the president, and if the president that appointed you is no longer in office, you're not serving for them anymore. So it makes sense for the new guy to put their person in.
Right.
But it was more than a year before the first Trump administration, appointed a NASA administrator that was confirmed by Congress. So it took a long time to get anything rolling in the space program from that standpoint. I don't know if that'll be the case this time around. It just depends. But somebody was suggesting if it's a Harris administration, that Bill Nelson, who is getting up there in age, he's in his 80s. I think he's Biden's age.
He's doing really well.
No, yeah, he is. It wouldn't. I think somebody I was. I think it was Eric Berger actually that suggested it's possible that Bill Nelson at some point would step down, and his deputy administrator Pam Melroy, former NASA astronaut, would take charge and eventually be confirmed. It would have to be confirmed by the Senate, obviously, if she's going to be start as acting and then to be the official NASA administrator. So there is a hypothetical scenario where next year you could have the first female president with the first female NASA administrator, the first female launch director, Charlie Blackwell Thompson, for the SLS rocket, launching the first woman to the moon. So, could happen that way.
That would be iconic.
Yeah, it would be pretty cool. And all these people are absolutely qualified for this. So,
absolutely. That's crazy.
Yeah. Who knows what'll happen, but there's a distinct possibility that could happen. So, anyway,
I'm down for it. Probably
should end something on not politics, just so we don't have everything down. I'm a political junkie, to be fair, but I also I like to be civil about somebody can, as long as somebody's not a jerk, I can have a conversation with somebody. So
I mean, it's your podcast, so you can talk whatever you want.
Well, I know. But there's something I just spitballing. And if everybody listened and said, don't do that, that's a bad idea, maybe I won't do it. But I'll try to get some in. Hey, anybody listen to this in the future, just let me know in the comments of topics, specifically in that topic, what you would want me to try to investigate and cover. Anybody that I can try to reach out to possibly that you think might know something. Or if you're listening to this and you are somebody that might know something, just let me know in the comments. I don't know, you might be somebody. But so yeah. What else is going on? We should probably wrap this
Oh
up.
god,
It's been an hour and a half, but
nothing much. I have some character events I'm doing for the community for like Halloween and Christmas coming up.
oh, nice.
So I'm playing like a princess,
Okay.
Princess Rapunzel for
Okay.
Halloween, and then I'm gonna be an elf with
Nice.
Santa Claus and
That's
Mrs.
awesome.
Claus. So just some community
There you
events.
go.
I'm excited.
I should probably see if there's any community events I can do some fun stuff with. Right now, it's just me trying to work on this channel.
I'm gonna try to branch out a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna start learning how to do Blender, the 3D. Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah. The
nice.
person I'm doing research for,
Hmm.
I don't know if it's appropriate for me to. It's fine. I do research for Jared Owen Animations. Not all.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
do
you've
all the animation. I don't do all his research, but he does, and he has a team that does the animations and all that stuff. They did one. As I
right.
showed you the one for the vehicle assembly building, and then
Hmm.
the most recent one was over the Gateway Arch. So anybody listening, go watch his video on the Gateway Arch. It's a phenomenal,
That's cool.
beautiful video. But he's looking at possibly seeing if I can at least get some Blender knowledge under my belt. So that'll be kind
That's
of fun to try
cool.
to learn. And
Absolutely.
maybe, in addition to paper models, maybe I can make 3D animation models for the Gateway on some of my videos in the
Hmm.
future.
Yeah, that would
so,
be cool. I'm excited to see
so,
that.
so that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm doing again more research every now and then, doing
Hmm.
editing, doing this stuff, DoorDash, and then learning how to do 3D modeling.
That's so cool.
you
Awesome.
know,
Keeping busy.
trying to keep busy. Someday I want to make it back to Florida though. Get
Yeah,
to
let me
see
know.
some launches. Gosh,
Hmm.
you guys get all the launches all the time. So, sorry you didn't get
It's
to go see the core stage. That
it's
sucks.
alright.
I was wondering though if you had how that was going to work out. If you had gone with another organization or if you made yourself the organization, but it was just a miscommunication for social media.
It was, oh yeah, it was a miscommunication on my part because I didn't know there's a difference between like normal media and
Okay.
social media.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, oh, I just saw another
Hmm.
social event and I was like, let me try.
What were you planning on
Yeah,
doing there?
so
Well, actually, I'll have this
I'm just
conversation.
live
Yeah,
streaming.
I'll have this conversation on the other side of the podcast here, so we don't.
Yeah,
Okay,
you're fine.
but yeah. Oh, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention. In a couple of weeks, we got the Polaris Dawn mission launching.
Ooh, hilarious.
It's a private mission to test SpaceX's spacesuits. They're
That's cool.
not their pressure suits, but it's a modification of their
It's
pressure suits.
third.
So they're actually
Okay.
going to go on the first commercial spacewalks. Yeah,
Nice.
it'll be
Wait,
like the
so
old
that's their,
the old Gemini days where they still have the little oxygen
that is
tether and
so
all that stuff.
funny.
But so there's no
Yeah.
backpack. So that's coming up on
That's in their,
the 26th, I believe.
that's in their new white spacesuits.
Yes, exactly.
That's so cool.
So that's coming
Yeah, I've
up.
been waiting for that.
That's coming up this month. And I guess there was another space mission that was launched. A crypto billionaire had bought a seat.
Let's go.
And this is a personal opinion of mine. I think this is the first crew mission that I'm not that excited about. Maybe I should
Oh
be.
no.
Maybe I should be. This is nothing against the thing, everything going on. It's just
Mm-mm.
crypto billionaire buys seat to go fly polar mission, brings along a few scientists with him, basically. Which is great.
What is he
They're gonna get
doing?
some science done. It's gonna be a polar mission around Earth. Well, the first time anybody's ever done that. Um,
Uh,
you don't
yeah,
need
that's a little nuts.
yeah. So there's going to be some safety issues when it comes to abort modes. I'm sure they'll figure all that
Mhm.
out. But it'll be cool for the first people to see the poles with their own eyes from orbit. That's never been done
True.
before. The highest inclination somebody's
The
ever been.
commercial, yeah,
Yeah.
like
So in that sense, it is pretty
that's
neat. It's just
Mhm.
aside from that, they're not really doing anything else that couldn't be done either with a robotic spacecraft or and you can say that about a lot of cruise spacecraft to be fair. I'll give people that
Mhm.
or just at a lower inclination. So I don't know. Maybe it's the crypto part that's rubbing me wrong, but it probably shouldn't.
Oh no.
So
That'd be kind of
again,
cool though. Imagine you have the money to do that.
that is neat, and that's also definitely got to remind myself too that stuff like this will be happening more often, and that's okay. and I'm also allowed to not be as
Just
excited. It's just
commercially orbit
yeah,
Earth.
it's just weird for me to actually not be that excited. Maybe I will be excited when it comes. They're looking at launching later by the end of the year, possibly.
Mhm.
So they've been training for a couple of years now, apparently in secret. Pretty cool, but
Sell your soul for a ticket.
to be fair, were I in his
Probably
situation, I'd
could.
probably do the same thing. So I got to give it to that. It's just I'm going through some things and mentally, you know,
That's
we're
fair.
going through a paradigm shift. I'm like, oh man, we really are at that phase where somebody, just anybody, can just do anything. You know, not trying to compare. This is not an apples to orange comparison at all, so don't take this the wrong way. But it just kind of reminds me a little bit of the Titan submersible
Hmm.
for the Titanic and all that stuff. Again,
Yeah.
not trying to compare the engineering here. It's a hot take, you know.
Completely different
Yeah,
engineering.
yes, one was a death trap. SpaceX's Dragon is not a death trap, um, but it just reminds me of a lot of these people are that paid to go on there were not tourists in the normal sense. They were paid. They paid their way to do science,
Right.
sort of. So they were like uh, paid partners, if that makes sense. It's a kind of a loophole,
Mhm.
almost like it feels like a loophole, at least in that particular situation. Not quite
Yeah.
the same thing here and all that. I get that, but
Third paid third wheel
yeah.
party.
So it feels like it's almost a guy who wanted to go to space and is just bringing a couple of scientist friends along with him. And this might be a hot take here. People can disagree with. Hit the dislike
To
if you
make it
disagree.
seem.
Just as cover, you know.
That's what I was just saying,
as
to make it
cover.
seem like he's
I
doing
mean, can you say
something.
it's kind of what happened with Inspiration 4? But I think the thing with Inspiration 4 is it came with a large charity aspect of it. You know, they raised $200 million for St. Jude Children's Hospital.
Hmm.
I have not heard, and maybe I'm wrong, but I have not heard something similar for this mission. So
You're right.
I don't know. So I think that's part of what I'm going through mentally about what's rubbing me
Yeah.
wrong about it.
There's no charity behind it. It's just some
That I
dude trying to
that I know of. There might be, and maybe that will be
last
coming in the
wish.
future. But but to be fair, it's private company, private vehicle. He's got the money. However, he got the money is irrelevant as long as he got it, you know, honorably. He's not like laundering money or something like that we know. I don't think he is. But
Oh my god.
I
Can
mean,
you imagine?
you never know. You know, maybe a drug cartel someday wants to go into space. Probably, obviously,
Yeah,
that won't happen.
dude.
You got ITAR
Probably already happened.
security risks there, but
True.
but we're getting to the point where just if you have the money, you don't have to do all these charitable work just to you know kind of prove your way up there. You can just do it, and that may not make you excited, and for me, it
That's
doesn't,
true.
and I'm gonna have to be okay with that because that's the way it is. So
Yep.
it's and yeah,
What they should do is make a commercial company so to have the public experience orbit, not just them.
yeah. Well,
That would be
you
cool.
can make a case that he bought his seat plus the three others and brought three members of the public with him. They just happened to be a scientist, an Arctic expert, and forgot who the other one was. But yeah, I don't know.
You should make it like a constant orbit
Yeah,
so we can be constantly putting
but
people.
maybe in our lifetime, going to space will be like old hat. You know, I mean, might still be rare-ish, but it might be rare as like flying overseas.
Mhm.
And most people
True.
a lot of people fly overseas, but most people in the country don't.
Yep.
So it's common, but it's not at the same time. Does that make sense?
Oh
Is
yeah,
that a
it's
good
definitely not.
analogy? I don't know. Am I just BSing this?
No, it's definitely not
So
common.
so anyway, there's a lot of other things we could be talking about, but we should probably wrap this up. We can go on next week. Who knows? We might be talking about the actual Starliner return plan next week, or we might be talking about the same thing.
Who knows?
We don't know. So, are you good to go?
I'm good,
You're good?
and it was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
I haven't had a good space talk in a while, and I hope my goal with this podcast, and for anybody listening, sometimes they're not going to be organized. This week wasn't really that organized. I kind of just it worked out for both of us to be on, and I just kind of like, okay, let's throw some topics together. And you guys can always in the comments chime in, ask questions. We just have a nice casual conversation about spaceflight, particularly human spaceflight, but it doesn't always have to be. And I know for me, I love having just space conversations. These are conversations that I don't really get to have here, and I live in Kansas. There's famously not a lot of space activity going on here. You can find some small pockets like the Cosmosphere in the middle of Kansas. That's 4 hours away from me. And of course, there's some companies that do some work there, but now I'm just getting into details. But as far as just having a conversation with, like with friends and family, I'm the expert in their eyes, you know? So it's like a one-sided conversation almost. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, it's not the same thing as just having a conversations with, you know, people who really love it and really want to have conversations and dedicated space fans. And so I'd like to have more people on over time. You know, Melody's been wonderful, and I love the fact, I'm very thankful that you are here to be a wonderful co-host. We got Cullen, who works in Kennedy Space Center and Visitor Center, and I know at times he's done a podcast before, but lately he's been real busy. And then of course there's Brandon in LA, and he's been on vacation lately. But there might be a time where all four of us are on together, or maybe even somebody else. So we can just kind of grow this as a nice little, ideally weekly, but sometimes we'll have gaps like we did. Just have fun, just talking about space, you know.
Absolutely.
So anyway, on that note, it has been 1 hour and 40 minutes of being live. So I'm going to go ahead and end this podcast. Thanks for listening to us nerds have casual conversations about space flight. Again, if you've enjoyed this episode, I did forget to say, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and launch that like button into orbit, as I always say. And right now we're a little over 6,000 subscribers. Might be a little bit of a pipe dream, but I would love for everybody to help build this channel up to 10,000 subscribers, possibly by the end of this year. I do have this weird goal of getting to 1 million subscribers, maybe 100,000. We'll go 1 million. We'll go big. Go big or go home, right? 1 million subscribers. 1 million subscribers. 1 million subscribers on Orbital Velocity by the time we land on the moon. I got some time, but yes, it'd be great. We could have this big space community, talk about space. Yeah. So that's one of my goals. So, but yeah, there's so much happening in the space world. I love sharing it. I love talking about it. Likewise, if you have any suggestions for next week, if we do come on next week, any suggestions, leave them in the comments. Leave them in the comments of other videos if you like. Watch some of my other videos. Like I said, thanks to Melody for being on here, and you can find Melody at Little Nerd TV on what would I say, Twitch, Threads, Twitter, and YouTube. And I think TikTok. I've got that in the description below. You can find her information. And with that, as I say, thanks again for watching, and until next time, ad Astra.
Ad Astra.